Now kolemoen will face Adzikov without further ado. For the victor glory, for the vanquished sorry boo.
Thank you very much to our wonderful minstrel for giving us the musical intro to this. And we are going to be seeing if Adzikov can break the curse and progress into tomorrow's semi-finals to face Tailbot, or will it be kolemoen, the online qualifier dark horse, taking the place?
Yeah, and big difference from the first players. I think these players are much more relaxed, much more chill kind of guys, not so confident, not so cocky. We saw Tailbot and Shaggy both, you know, roasting each other, being very arrogant. But I think here both players respect the game a lot, respect each other. It's going to be a really, really cool match to see.
Yeah, we've seen some fantastic characters today, and these two are by no means not part of that. Adzikov, like I say, I just absolutely love his attitude, just saying, look, if I lose, yeah, I'll be sad for a few hours, but then it's just going to motivate me to work even harder. And kolemoen just coming out of nowhere and citing some pretty awesome influences and reasons. And I'm very, very excited to see both of these players play for different reasons, which makes it a very, very enticing matchup.
Yeah, and the most important part, we're going to see decks very soon. And of course, the different game plans, the different archetypes they bring to the matchup is going to be very important. And also, of course, the ban, which is kind of a staple of competitive Gwent. It really shows kind of not thinking just what your decks do, but what your opponent's decks can do and how to stop that. I think bans are really an essential part of Gwent as well.
Yeah, absolutely. It's interesting seeing that we are, of course, in this beautiful Nilfgaardian castle. So many players, you know, choosing to risk the Emperor's wrath so far, and will be going for banning Nilfgaard. It'll be interesting to see those in just a second, but, you know, kind of a choicey decision when you've got Emir standing over your shoulder, don't you think?
It is, but I mean, Emir, the deck is really strong. Spies has proven for many months now that it's been, you know, one of the strongest decks, one of the most consistent decks that can really pull off a strategy pretty much every single game. I mean, few things can really stop the Spies engine from pulling forward, and also the, you know, kind of the finisher with Joachim. So it's a deck that most people tend to ban because it's just been so powerful and hasn't really been hit by any nerfs in the past few patches. So it's still standing pretty strong.
Do you think its near sort of immunity to the coin flip system contributes to this?
I think there's certain decks that can really overpower and kind of work with the coin flip system really well, especially like Hensel, but Spies is also one of the decks like Hensel that can really overpower if you have the red coin on your side, and banning it out means that you kind of have to not play around that and not have to, you know, have that one game where it's like, oh, well, maybe I already lost, because Spies is a really strong deck. Obviously, if both players ban it, then it's like nothing happened. We're just playing in a Nilfgaard-free world, which, like you said, might, you know, madden the Emperor quite a bit.
Well, then again, maybe he won't have to see his soldiers getting killed and everything will be fine. Here's hoping, but it looks like both players are getting ready to head into Game 1. So we can get this second series underway, just stoking the fire in the back, getting the flames hot, and ready for some Gwent.
I think the most important part here is going to be the nerves. Both players, like they said, they are not the cockiest, not the most arrogant, and with that maybe comes some nerves, some loss of composure, for example, especially such a big setting like this, being a challenger event with so much money and so much glory on the line as well. So hopefully both players ready to go and not, you know, nervous at all, ready to do their best and really show us why they're so good, why they, you know, managed to qualify through the qualifiers as well, and make it all the way here through just sheer skill, really.
Yeah, absolutely. It's good that you touch on nerves here because, of course, we have kolemoen pretty new to the tournament scene, so you never know how players are going to react there. And then we have Adzikov, and Adzikov's a very unique one because while we have seen him at so many tournaments and, you know, he has played well, don't let his results trick you, he also seems to be kind of aware that this is almost like his redemption arc, right? Like, he knows that he, for himself, he's got to do well at this tournament. Even though it's not like he's going to, you know, quit if he doesn't, this is a big, big moment for him. And you've got to wonder if that's weighing on his shoulders.
Yeah, there's a tournament he wants to advance past the quarterfinals in. It's definitely this one. The past few tournaments, maybe a practice kind of round for Adzikov. He's waiting, maybe biding his time, ready to show his full force in this challenger event. Like we said, has a lot of consequences with qualifying to the World Masters, for example, and also just the enormous chunk of prize money that you take home as well. So maybe Adzikov was waiting for this moment to really show the world what he's made of and what he can bring to the table when it comes to Gwent.
Yeah, absolutely. Both players are just picking their decks at the moment. We will be in game momentarily while the Mana Glass is losing his patience in the background, but I'm very interested. What do you think players lead off with here?
I mean, we're going to see the decks first. We're going to see Adzikov bringing Eredin, and kolemoen will answer that with Unseen Elder. So two different monster decks right off the bat. Going to be kind of different there. We're seeing a mirror from both players as well. Pretty standard builds. I mean, it hasn't changed too much in the past few months. We're going to see a very surprising Bruver Hoog from Adzikov, which I believe is the only player to maybe bring Skoyatel to this tournament. We don't know yet, but it's a faction that hasn't seen so much popularity in the past few months, past few patches, so that could be the case here as well. I'm going to see maybe kolemoen answer that with King Brand, for example. It's going to be a pretty standard deck build as well with Ceres and the Morgvar carryover. And then, of course, we're going to see kolemoen also bringing full test, a pretty, value build that has been, we've seen it in Pro Ladder a lot the past few months. It's a build that works really well, and I think it's going to be pretty powerful. And we're going to see full test from Adzikov as well, so the possibility of a mirror there as well.
Yeah, very, very powerful Pro Ladder deck, that full test, utilizing those trebuchets to pretty devastating effect. But here we go, into the first game. It is Eredin versus the Unseen Elder. Well predicted, my friend.
And we call it two very different decks that do two very different things. But, I mean, we're going to go over the general strategy here as well. Obviously, the Eredin deck for Adzikov is going to be going with a lot of weather and the Iris combo, of course. And kolemoen, this is not the greedy version of the Nekker decks that do have, the multiple Nekker warriors. Instead, it's a more consistent maybe version with no Nekker warriors and just 3 Nekkers and a lot of points, basically.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting. We're not seeing any sort of Archgriffin play from kolemoen here. We're only seeing an Abaya that can deal with those frosts. So the potential for really high frost attrition damage from Adzikov is just huge.
And we don't see Abaya in hand. It can be drawn by Gils, for example, but even then, you really want it in hand against Eredin.
Yeah, definitely. You need that contingency plan. Because when you have 3 frosts on the board and then the riders start falling down, that is just so much damage. You have to get out of that round as soon as possible. So Abaya will be a target draw for kolemoen, I imagine. He will go fishing for that with things like Frightener and Gils. So it'll be interesting if he gets it out. It could end up being very, very important in this matchup.
And Adzikov does go second in this particular matchup in game 1, which means that he has a lot more time to build up this very slow tempo build-up of putting the frost on the board and getting that slow build-up damage over the course of this first round. I mean, kolemoen can kind of answer back with the fact that he has the Harpy hatchlings that come out, and if those do die in the frost, they'll summon the Harpies from the deck because they are beasts, so he has kind of a small buffer to that frost for the first few rounds, but after that, it's going to get really, really blizzardy maybe.
Exactly. It's going to get a little bit frosty for kolemoen, but we do see the importance of the coin flip being highlighted here. Adzikov going second allows him to make lower tempo plays. Like, even by playing a White Frost, he doesn't actually put any points on the board, but because he's going second and he's reacting to his opponent, it leaves him with a pretty small points gap that were kolemoen to pass, he could close within 1 card, and then, win with a pretty fantastic situation. So the coin flip allows you to basically play lower tempo plays, like setting up that frost damage, for very little punishment.
I like the White Frost committal early on because this kind of means if you have a Abaya, you have to kind of use it now because you're forced to use it with 2 rows of Frost. If you don't have a Abaya, I think Adzikov will know that, and with 2 rows of Frost, even if he doesn't, make a 3rd one in that back row, it's still going to do a lot of damage over a long round. So I think he knows that this is enough to really get a hold of this round 1 and really power through.
Yeah, interesting to see Frost having such a presence on the board already without any hounds being committed. This is just coming from the White Frost, and already we see those drowners dragging that Ekamara around, trying to tear it to shreds, and they'll succeed pretty soon. And when you start losing Ekamaras, that's a big, big problem, because all of a sudden the Dry Path loses availability. But look at this.
And kolemoen finds both the Wielding Spirit and the Abaya, his 2 best draws, and he goes for the Wielding Spirit, which maybe means he's going for a shorter round, because he didn't want to clear this out, so maybe it means he's going to try and get some carryover, get some, presence on the board, and when he thinks it's time to pass because you're going to get overpowered by the riders, by the Iris, for example, you get out of there as quick as possible and go to a new round 2 that doesn't have any weather on the board anymore.
Yeah, of course, and that Abaya is sitting right there too in case of the weather. So that is a really fantastic draw for kolemoen, and that Woodland Spirit is even very nice, of course, because as those wolves die in the frost, the Harpies are going to be coming out, and Adzikov is going to find it very, very difficult to keep up a tempo from this round. Because we see an Igni there, we see an Iris there. Those typically aren't cards that he wants to spend right now. Igni is going to struggle to find targets really until, like, a Prince Toad or a Manticore comes down, or, the Nekkers are charged up for round 3. So this is actually looking like a pretty nice position for kolemoen, and there's the pass.
And Adzikov, you have time going second to do more of a setup kind of play and play that White Frost, but if kolemoen decides to really go into this round and play a lot of very high tempo, especially with the Harpies, threatening from his deck, you kind of get in a position where you have to pass and get out of this round because you're just going to go down in card advantage.
Yeah, and even going down in card advantage, but you've got the carryover right there in the Ekamara. The Ekamara did not fall to the Frost. So kolemoen is actually going to be pretty happy with his position. And we see a mulligan drawing a Frost there for Adzikov. A little bit unfortunate. Time to see what kolemoen gets out.
I think it's going to be a very easy game plan here for kolemoen. He knows that if he goes into a long round 3 against this Frost build from Adzikov, it's going to be really, really tricky to be able to surge ahead in points, especially with combos like Iris and Igni, for example, that do a lot of damage in a long round. He knows that he has a carryover advantage. He knows that he can go for a bleeding route in round 2 and really push out Adzikov until he sees that he's not going to get back card advantage, and then pass and get rid of some of the Frost from Adzikov as well.
Absolutely. What do you think this decision to keep double Nekkers in hand from kolemoen?
It plays around locks, for example, and most of the time, if you're going for a short round 3, you don't specifically, I mean, it's kind of safer to keep 2 Neckers because you guarantee carryover, even though it means that maybe you can just have to mulligan the Necker in round 3 and be able to draw it again with like an Ekimara, for example, in round 3 and get that point still on the board. But I think it's safe against decks that might have locks and might have ways to pull them off.
Yeah, we see Adzikov starting off that frost damage, getting the attrition engine going, but when he's got it, not really get bled out too much this round. He needs to get it going early, but the points aren't on the board. That Hound is only a 4 strength, so he's going to need to start committing legitimate value pretty soon.
And like we said, still Harpy's starting to come from the deck, so it's always not just the Frost being low value because you're playing a 4 strength unit with, value over time plays, but also the fact that you're giving tempos to your opponent and you're giving him an easy way to access that beast synergy with the Harpies and maybe save his consume triggers for the Harpy X, for example, that don't have that Frost synergy or anti-synergy, and you can get points that way.
Yeah, it's very interesting to see that kolemoen has his Frightener available while Adzikov doesn't as well, which is very, very important in this round too. So I really would, especially with the 25-point gap, I would expect to see Frightener come out of kolemoen fairly soon.
Yeah, so even if kolemoen decides that maybe he's getting bled out and he's going to lose that point advantage and let Adzikov catch up and be a card down, he does have that Frightener to answer back, and Spies in round 2 fulfill that purpose. You give your opponent points, which is kind of weird to maybe some of the newer players that don't understand the mechanic, but it basically means you can stay in this round as long as possible, as long as your opponent can answer back with a Spy of his own.
Absolutely. It also helps drag you back up in card advantage, so it can kind of help negate the whole last say aspect of round 3 if that's something you're staring in the face. So this is interesting for Adzikov because everything that he has is fairly attritional damage base. He's got the Drowns there, they're a nice bit of value, but there's no target for them right now. So he needs to commit Uridin to just really get some points on the board, close that gap up. He's going to kill the Harpy Hatchling. That gets the Frosting on the Ekimara, increases the value of the Frost next round, but interesting choice there.
Yeah, I mean, I think Adzikov might be trying to open up a slot for Iris to go off immediately because with the 1 strength units, it kind of blocks that from happening. And it also makes Riders, even if they do 3 points of damage, if you have a 1 strength unit, it's only going to do 1 point of damage. So it's kind of, there's a lot of ways to block and kind of play around that Frost plan from Adzikov in kolemoen's deck. So you can try and do that and maximize the amount of points you can save in this round 2. Yeah,
absolutely. And that's a great thing to do because when he's relying so heavily upon Iris, you can't have that blocked. I mean, Adzikov's hand's already looking relatively low point. I mean, the Igni is almost there on the middle row, but that Frost is actually going to make the Igni harder and harder to hit on that Elder, so really great placement by kolemoen, but Adzikov needs to find ways to get value, and that Iris is certainly one of them.
And kolemoen's going for definitely for the point plays here, and definitely not, I think maybe he's not thinking about playing Frightener, because Frightener, you either go for the Frightener play where you guarantee carryover as long as your opponent doesn't have a Spy, or you go for the point play and try and out-tempo your opponent and find the best pass possible in this round 2. But maybe he just wants to go for the point and maybe eat the Frightener with Giant Toad, for example, in the next round if he draws into that. So we'll have to see what he decides to do here.
Yeah, I really like the Woodland Spirit placement here as well. Blocking that Igni, he is playing around it, of course, because even though the Frost damage would take the Foglet, would have went in the Frost and enabled the Igni. So really good placement by kolemoen to put that on the Siege row, even though he's sacrificing potential damage off that Fog, although now of course he's not. He will essentially just say that Unseen Elder is not getting burnt up for now.
And there we see kolemoen with a punishing draw from the Frightener, 3 Neckers in hand, and the whole carryover aspect is completely forgotten about. Nothing in his hand provides carryover anymore, so although he might be able to get card advantage by out-tempoing his opponent in this round 2, there is no more carryover, which is kind of the big strong point with this Unseen Elder deck. You have that extra amount of points going into round 3 that Adzikov will not have.
Yeah, that's really brutal on the draw. That's exactly what kolemoen didn't want to see. And of course, by keeping 2 Neckers in hand, he probably figured that he'd significantly reduced his risk of that. But sadly, this is a card game, and sometimes draws do not go the way you'd imagine. So he does get a Necker out. So that's very, very savage for kolemoen, and it is going to easily deny him potentially 10+ points of carryover value next round.
And this Frightener completely changes the name of the game in round 2, because Adzikov before was playing to really catch up in tempo and make sure he can catch up. But because kolemoen gave him 12 free points essentially, he's now going to start playing his weaker cards and trying, get rid of his bad cards and have his better cards for round 3, and maybe planning ahead for a longer round. For example, playing that first light there that kind of gets rid of the fog on that back row, and also just says, I can stay in for a long round. I'm going to play my bad cards and save my good stuff for round 3.
Yeah, I'll be very interested to see how kolemoen chooses to proceed into this round. If at all, essentially, he may just choose to, go into round 3 on equal, but then he would be facing a long round with Frost, with Ignis, with Iris, which is a very scary thing indeed. But the Rider comes down, so, instant kill Iris isn't a thing right now, unless the other Rider was to come out. So kolemoen is not looking at many great options here. He's got a Buyer for a little just bit of damage value if he wants to open up the gap again. And Karen is lacking a significant target. It can eat the Eredin, but there's really not too much here for kolemoen.
I think kolemoen's going to have, I mean, his deck in general has the better burst options in a short round 3, and he knows that Adzikov's deck kind of revolves around the combo strategies with the Frost, like you said, but also with Iris, Caretaker, and the Riders, providing, you know, big point advantages. So even though he doesn't have carryover, I think he's really going to bleed out in this round 2, and maybe save something like Monster's Nest, for example, as just a 1-card finish in round 3, because he can't really use the Neckers, obviously. I mean, they're just 8 strength, and they're all in his hand, so they're absolutely useless.
Yeah, I mean, right now the Neckers are just representing bear drops on the board, unless one was to be mulligan next round and then one eaten. But for now, he's just going to cater and buff up the strength of those Neckers, and at 9 points, they should be enough to give him the pass each round should he desire it. So it's, you know, kolemoen's got bleeding options, but he doesn't really have power options right now.
But at this point, playing Frightener without your opponent answering back, I think you can kind of, you know, just say, I'm going to play my card, you play your card, and I'll decide when to pass, when to... he has the power. He decides when this round is over. And keeping Monster Nest is going to be his best option, I think. It denies also, for example, the Igni Drowner combo, which can be devastating, especially in such a huge unit that Monster Nest will provide with that Ghoul on that Manticore, which will be a 20-point unit. So if Igni hits that, I mean, game over. But I think kolemoen knows that, he's going to play around that, and, you know, go for a very short round.
I'm so
All right, here it comes the Iris. It's the instant kill Frost, thanks to that Wild Hunt Rider, and boom, it goes off. 25 points given to Adzikov. Iris, pretty good card.
The dangerous part here is that kolemoen has to watch out with a point gap. If it gets too big, Adzikov can potentially say, I'm going to hero pass. I'm going to maybe, you know, take a guess and say you don't have the points to beat me if the gap gets too big. And kolemoen might be in trouble if he can't do that. So he have to really count his points and make sure that he can always catch up if Adzikov were to pass.
Absolutely, you're so right on that. There's no feeling worse than getting called out and getting that hero pass. For the newer players among you, what a hero pass is, yeah, as Panda said, when you see your opponent's cards, maybe he's got 1 card left, you're 20 points ahead, and you go, there's no way you have 20 points in 1 card. And you just pass anyway, even though you need to win the round. So hero pass is a real thing, but kolemoen does not want to run that risk, and he's going to get out of this round and go 5v1, 6v6, card count into round 3.
Luckily for kolemoen, he did win that round 1, so he has last say in round 3. As long as Adzikov, of course, doesn't play a Frightener, for example, so he will be able to dodge that Igni for the most part, at least on the Monster's Nest, but maybe not on anything else. And we do see some big cards here, like the Ghoul, like the Ekimara if it does eat a Necker, for example, so we're still going to see potentially a pretty big Igni target with the Drowners assisting.
Yeah, absolutely. This Drowner's going to be pivotal in lining up such a fantastic Igni here. The Ekimara is probably kolemoen's thinking a nice draw, because it allows him to get that mulligan back out that that Necker back out that he mulliganed, and that's nice. And the Ghoul's going to be big, but those Drowners and the movement they represent is going to make that Igni so easy to hit. The question is, will 2 units line up, or will it just be a high value like the Ghoul?
I think for the most part, lining up 2 units is quite hard, and most of these players know to play around that in some way or another. They don't know the deck list, obviously, but they can expect cards like Igni, cards like Scorch to appear in round 3 as finishers and maybe play around that just a little bit. But we're going to see some big units coming out, and Abaya as well maybe doesn't find those 3 units lined up if Adzikov tries to play around that as well. So Abaya, a card that's great for clearing weather, but when it comes to using its Manticore Venom, it's not, you know, fantastic if it doesn't have 3 units to hit.
Yeah, and there's a real threat here now, because kolemoen's faced with either play something in the Frost or get something drowned into the Frost, which isn't a fantastic decision to be making, because either way you're going to be taking a great deal of damage. Those Drowners really proving their worth. And it'll be interesting to see where kolemoen goes to the postman with this Ghoul. He's choosing to put it in the Sea Tray, which does open up the Drowner option, but perhaps he's thinking that limits Igni potential, conversely.
And this is very smart, I think, kolemoen deciding to play. He has pretty much 2 big value plays, the Monster Nest and the Ghoul. He plays the Ghoul early so that if Adzikov, his game plan revolves around weather and damage, he'll damage that Ghoul down a few points of strength, and the Igni will be less valuable in result. So it basically plays around Igni and just potential Scorch effects, for example, that Aridin does sometime play in these decks that people play on Pro Ladder as well. So I think a very heads-up play, playing his second highest unit first so it gets damage over time, and then playing his finisher unit at the very end of the game.
Yeah, I agree with that. I like the Ghoul sort of out there as almost like the damage bait, and then he's just going to try to keep that high power play far away from that Igni. But here we see the Wild Hunt Rider going down. Adzikov is just saying, this is my kill row. Things I put in there are going to die. If they don't die from the Drowner, they'll die very, very quickly afterwards. So big damage potential in that range row. But unfortunately for Adzikov right now, there's no units in it.
Yeah, it's interesting he didn't use the Drowners first. I think he knows that the Drowners are really his life support for that Igni, so he knows he has to really try and save them and make sure he can get a guaranteed value target with that Igni. So he's waiting it out. He's losing some points on that Ghoul not having moved it before, but I think he has to wait and make sure he can hit that Igni and get the points on it.
Interesting. Seems like there may be a Drowner going in the Siege Raid to throw that Necker up. which actually, because of the damage, won't be enough to... Oh, sorry, it will be enough. What am I talking about? It's not into weather. So it will be enough to enable Igni, but I would expect to see that Ekimara answered, right? That Ekimara will come down, eat the Nekker, and just deny that completely.
Yeah, Adzikov playing very safe, but playing safe might punish him because we do see an Ekimara here, and we see different ways that kolemoen can also affect his rows and change those points around. I mean, that's a very clear play, not moving into Frost. He's playing for that Igni and trying to get the max value on it, but he's losing many points not playing into Frost as well, so it's a tricky situation for Adzikov. He wants to make sure his cards aren't dead in round 3 and they get as much value as possible while also playing quite safe.
Yeah, kolemoen's got some serious quick maths to do right now because that is signposting. That is Adzikov just going, hey kolemoen, I've got Igni. So kolemoen now has to figure out a way of playing around this and managing to keep a significant point lead. The likelihood is, at some point, something's going to get ignited. That's going to happen. So he has to minimize loss as much as possible.
But now he plays into the weather without knowing that there is going to be another Drowner going and being able to affect the rows once again, and kolemoen has no more ways to kind of play around that, so he's going to lose some points from that Frost damage because he was playing around the front row Igni as well if he played the Ekimara there, with the second Nekker coming out and being, exactly 25 points once again. But in this case, playing safe is going to also punish kolemoen because there is another Drowner.
I mean, there's a potential here, though, that if Adzikov waits for that Ekimara to take some Frost damage, he can end up hitting a double Nekker on the Igni, which could be huge. 5 points more than the Ghoul would be. So, and when you're playing to this close to margin, that can really matter, but this Frost attrition damage is just starting to look so scary. Yeah, we see 2 Frost, maybe a bit late. You want to, play Frost as early as possible, specifically in round 1 maybe, but still going to get a decent amount of damage for a bronze, maybe, average value. There we go, there's a buyer. Unfortunately for kolemoen, because these units are not damaged, Clear Skies will not buff them. They have to be red health to be buffed by 2 by Clear Skies. So it's just going to remove the Frost, remove that engine damage for Adzikov, and he's going to have to go for the Igni.
Yeah, now he has a Drowner to set up that Igni perfectly. Nothing kolemoen can do. It's going to be a big Igni in that back row, but we're still going to see a very big Monster Nest as well, and already a really big point cap for kolemoen, so I think it just won't be enough for Adzikov.
I don't think it will be. Even without the Monster Nest, there's an 11-point Nekker just sitting there, going, hey, what's up? Don't forget about me. So that's a significant point margin. I mean, Igni's going to come down here for, 22? That's it's going to put Adzikov 18 points ahead. There's an 11-point Nekker. He needs 8 points from Monster's Nest to win this, and I think he's going to be able to do that.
And kolemoen knows he can now play the Monster Nest because there is no more ways that, if he moves another unit, he doesn't have a play for Igni because there is only 1 card left. Instead, he drowners and moves. It's a perfect way to do it, play. I mean, he's reading that Adzikov 100%.
Salt in the wound. Oh my goodness, salt in the wound, disrupting that Igni. kolemoen's going to be very, very happy with that game. Very well played by him in that final round, I must say. The signposting from Adzikov immediately set his game plan in moment, and then, as soon as he knew that Igni was coming, because of the signposting by Adzikov, he simply had to play around it. He had to center his entire round around that 1 card, because we've seen how impactful that card can be.
Yeah, I mean, it's great to see players not only playing around what's on the board and what cards they see, but also the cards that the opponents are kind of suggesting that they have as well, because it's very obvious with a few cards that have very specific effects. And you know that you're going to see cards like Igni, if you see you're lining up for 25 points and losing points on a Frost that's on an open row, something's wrong there. There's something that's making him lose some points on the Frost row to get more points later on with an Igni, for example. So kolemoen proving he's here to win this. I mean, he's playing very well, a very skilled matchup there from both players, but in the end, kolemoen knew when to pass. Obviously, he drew a Frightener round 2 and Adzikov didn't, which is a big thing as well. But even without carryover for round 3, without those Nekkers, he was still able to pull ahead with just a big point lead.
Yeah, it was a really serious round 3 there. Drowners just proving their worth in every way imaginable, defensively, offensively, just for tempo value. Drowners really sort of the card of that match. If I had to, give a player of the match to that game, it would definitely be the Drowner. So interesting to see a bronze unit just become so core in such a really tense matchup. Really great first game.
Yeah, I mean, it's great to disrupt strategies, to also help out strategies. For example, with a clear weather synergy. I mean, it's quite an obvious synergy. I think no one can miss that, but also, like you said, in a defensive manner, helping to play around Igni, helping to play around maybe your opponent's weather as well to move units out of the weather. So it's I think it's a card that has a very high skill gap where you have to know what you're doing and kind of read your opponent's game plan to know when to use it defensively, when to use it offensively. But in the end, I think they both played it really well. But we're going right into another mirror. I mean, this is the day of mirrors.
Match. Here we go. It's going to be a Northern Realms Civil War as we see plenty of Blue Stripes Commandos and Temerian Infantry on the draw, just as Northern Realms likes to do. But it looks like both players are managing to correct their opening hands pretty well, it seems.
And not only is it a faction mirror, but it's actually a leader mirror because we do see 2 full tests. Each player is bringing full tests to this tournament, a deck that has been quite popular over the last, maybe the last month or so. It's gotten popularity. It used to be only maybe 40 card Foltest, which is kind of a meme deck that also became quite strong on ladder. But in this case, a new breed of Foltest has risen to the pro ladder rankings, and both players putting a lot of confidence in this deck and bringing it to the tournament.
Yeah, both players really showing their pro ladder pedigree here. I mean, these decks are identical with the slight exception that I believe
Adzikov is
Adzikov, yeah.
a first light.
Yes.
These are 27 and 26 card Foltest, so we've always seen 25 card decks. The players finally maybe evolving the meta a bit where you have to include other cards to make the deck work better. It seems odd and it seems like you're going to make it less consistent, but there's certain cards like Reaver Scout and First Light that don't affect the deck too much because they have that rally option. You just thin out more Reavers or more cards, but it still adds, a lot of, it makes the decks a little bit different.
Yeah, I think that the First Light inclusion is really, really interesting.
Onward!
I almost wonder if that's an impact of previous tournaments we've seen. We saw Juhar's Weather doing so much damage in Gwent Slam, and now all of a sudden all these players are showing up with Weather Clears and First Lights in their decks.
Yeah, I think
so really interesting tournament tech there.
I think everyone has a little bit of PTSD from, not just Juha, but also Metrenos in another Gwent.
Yes, yeah, the infamous Metra God bringing his gold weather.
Depending on the meta, terrifying. The weather can do a lot of damage, and I think all these players are prepared in a very serious and important tournament. They have to play around everything and play very safely. I think that's the word, safely.
Yes, absolutely. We're seeing that in the deck choices today. We're seeing maybe a few less memes, except Vesemir Mandrake, that's pretty meme. But other than that, we're seeing pretty defensive picks like these Weather Clears, the Abayas, the First Lights, and so whatnot. So pretty interesting openers coming out actually. Kolemoen choosing to go for a little bit more damage-based opener to disrupt the buffing potential of these Blue Stripe Scouts. Because of course, that Blue Stripe Scout's coming out is not going to buff those other two on the board because of the ballistas disrupting damage. So interesting to see almost like an offensive versus defensive opening here.
Exactly. You end up taking not just the points of damage that the reinforced ballista does normally, but also the points that it would gain from that synergy with the future Blue Stripe Commandos as well. And I mean, it's really an interesting play because it means you know what your deck is doing, your opponent's deck is doing, and you know how to play around some of these very small, subtle things that those few points might be the decider in this round one. So I think it's really important for these players to really micromanage and know how to get all these extra points all the time.
Yeah, definitely. Kolemoen switching it up to go for a little bit of tempo, choosing not to repeat his reinforced ballista play because he could have disrupted it again, but of course he doesn't know Adzikov has access to his third Blue Stripe Scout. And here we go, this is the card that has become pretty darn scary on the ladder. It is the Trebuchet, because of course there's so much row stacking going on these days. These cards are just sheer points, right? Like between a double crewman, that's
if you have that crewman synergy for a bronze, I mean it's spectacular.
Yes,
a player that likes points, likes trebuchets. It's just a fantastic card in terms of sheer value. They don't do too much in terms of disruption or playing around a certain game plan or anything like that. But there's the amount of points they give is just fantastic just to play as a raw value card.
Yeah, they're extremely good. They are just like you say, pure me put points on board, but they do it very, very well. So Trebuchet is really sort of flavor of the month almost on Pro Ladder, really, and we're seeing them to great effect. Although no trebuchets in the hand of Kolemoen, he will instead be relying on damage from those ballistas and the points from Siege Towers. Another very, very good tempo card.
And Adzikov going second, still ahead here, so he could pass here, and Kolemoen will be able to play another card as well. But I think in the end he knows he has to just keep on playing, thin out his deck with the Blue Stripes Commandos. Obviously you want to play all these cards in round one so you don't draw them further on in the game. And you don't want to play into, for example, drawing a dead card in round 2 or 3, like you saw Shaggy doing with his monster list. So definitely thinning is very important in round one.
Look at this buff disruption from Kolemoen though. Only the Blue Stripe Scout and the Commando it pulled getting buffed there. He has actually managed to disrupt 4 units from getting buffed. So the exponential value of every time you disrupt those buffs is just going up and up and up.
I told you so, you idiot.
Kolemoen. And now Kolemoen is going to swap up into his tempo, and he's going to be playing it down free of disruption.
Exactly. I mean, I messed up earlier because Kolemoen was going second. He has a chance to play a bit slower tempo, and I messed up the names there. And he's able to play, not as aggressively as Adzikov, just kind of, biding his time and waiting out, and finally thinning a few cards that he had to thin to just make sure he didn't draw them round 2 as well.
Yeah, apologies for sometimes messing up the names. I've probably done it as well. We get sometimes we see the blue players red and the red players blue. It's all the fun of casting. We like a challenge, but it is very, very interesting that Kolemoen can just hang back a little bit. He can play his tempo later because even if he goes -1, the first round in any mirror is so impactful, right? Because getting to dictate the pace of the game, especially when you know the exact deck your opponent's playing, is, well, you can have a damn good guess at it because you've got the same one, is very, very important.
And we may see, I mean, Horn with John and Talus coming from kolemoen would be a very devastating tempo play, but I think he knows that it wouldn't be as useful because even if he uses Horn and Talus, he's only going to get ahead by a few points, and Adzikov can still kind of play into this. Maybe further in the round where he sees that Adzikov's kind of in the corner and can't get out of that, corner, he's going to decide to pressure and play that John and Talus as well.
Yeah, I mean, he may just choose to read this matchup and do something like the Margarita on the Siege Tower. Essentially, Margarita's going to lack a utility lock here, so you may as well slam it on something that's got a bunch of points, which is certainly a Siege Tower. So that represents a nice little bit of value, and I struggle to see how he'd get that much more out of it in this matchup.
And the John and Talus here, indicates that kolemoen wants to go for this round, wants to definitely make sure to win this round and do a lot of damage, or he can play Ronvid, for example, if he needs to, and get that crewman synergy as well for the future rounds.
Blood alone can my maid's honor besmirch.
Maid Bilberry's honor will be being defended by kolemoen as we see John Natalis pulling out our boy Ronvid of the Small Marsh with his permanent crewman antics. Such a fantastic card. I've already stated this, one of my favorite additions to the Northern Realms lineup, and it is going to be
for Maid Bilberry's honor.
What happens now? Is Maid Bilberry thoroughly defended now? I don't know. Do these guys duel or something?
There's a lot of defense going on. Duel, we might see that in the future, not just yet. But of course, this is a mirror match. We see Ronvid answered by Ronvid. You're going to see a lot of similar plays. We see a difference there with Siege Towers and the Reinforced Ballistas, for example. But other than that, it's a very similar deck from both players. So we're going to see a lot of similar plays.
Absolutely, and this is where we see the value of that Blue Stripe Scout buff disruption coming in for kolemoen. All of his sitting on a lovely 7, except the slightly wounded one to the left. Whereas Adzikov's are scattered all over the place because that buff nature was just disrupted so efficiently.
You have to see Adzikov, how he decides to answer back to this and try and stay in this round. We see Dijkstra, which isn't a card you want to normally use in round 1. It's kind of a win condition. And we see Shawnee in the same case from kolemoen. You kind of need a rest target for that as well. But everything else, I think, can be used this round, especially the Horn from Adzikov, if he does use it. And kolemoen can be patient with a Margarita, get some extra value maybe as well.
Or it looks like it may answer Ronvid for Ronvid. Of course, that carryover is so important in this game. Margarita, a jealous love rival of Maid Bilberry, will be shutting down both Ronvids, and that is really going to just take away all the value of that card for these players.
And it opens up the Horn from Adzikov without really getting punished by a possible Margarita in the future. Igni can be played in these decks, but it's not maybe typical. But I mean, we still see some good Ignis here. If they were here, we see 15 from both players, but maybe it's not the most standard gold pick in the full test value deck. So I think both players know to play around some things, but others not so much, just because from a sheer statistics point of view.
Yeah, I mean, this is a really, really interesting place to be, because if I'm correct, I believe that marching orders would actually also be Stennis for Adzikov.
And he'd have 2 extra points.
Yeah, 2 extra points. So Adzikov has he has a 1 point stronger Stennis. Oh, no, that would be buff 2. Okay, so Adzikov has a 2 point stronger Stennis.
But he's 2 points, under.
And he's 2 points under. So essentially, both players have Stennis, and they're equal. And then Shani versus Dijkstra. And if you spent Dijkstra in round 1, that's when you know that the game's going pretty nutty.
I think the Stennis pull will be the most important here. If they pull Infantryman, that's really the best pull. It's just a very insane amount of tempo from both players because of the buffs from the Commandos as well. The Blue Stripe Scouts, sorry. So we see Stennis coming out. We do see a Siege Tower instead of the Infantryman. That might be the difference. If kolemoen can pull Infantryman, they will be 21 points, I believe, if they are buffed to 7.
They'll be enough.
And that'll
be going to be so core for Stennis to do his job here. A Siege Tower would... Oh no, has he played all of his Siege Towers? No, a Siege Tower would also be enough, right?
Depends on the crewman pocket.
Yeah, it would go down. He's got a double crewman pocket to the left. He's got 2 Blue Stripe Scouts.
Exactly.
So a Siege Tower would be enough. Infantry would be enough. Stennis is looking like the right decision for kolemoen here. And barring a hideous backfire, it should go well for him.
And if he forces Adzikov to play the Dijkstra, the Infantrymen, they get thinned out. Huge point swing, and this gives kolemoen the chance to drive past in round 2 if Adzikov decides to save that Dijkstra for round 3 as a finisher. And now kolemoen, because both Ronvids are locked, both players without any carryover, can drive past in round 2. Even cards means he'll go a card up into round 3, and Adzikov is in a very, very bad position.
Yes, this has not gone the way of Adzikov. kolemoen with that, but it's actually the buff destruction that made the difference. It is that amount of points. So kolemoen playing very, very well with those early ballistas, getting himself round 1. Adzikov gets a very nice draw with his infantry out. That is a big, big power drop for sure. But other than that, he's going to want to keep that Dijkstra for round 3. So right now, it looks like we'll be being Trebuchet. Temerian may get mulliganed, and he may just try to get one out through Dijkstra or through a round 3 draw, though.
I think Adzikov will read that there is a dry pass incoming from Kolemoen, and he knows to save those, so he doesn't draw 2 infantrymen in round 3. He knows to mulligan that and try and only get 1 in round 3, or even, mulligan all of them and get them from Dijkstra as well. So this is a deck that's very consistent. It plays its cards in a way where it thins to a point where you know what you're getting from Dijkstra in round 3 most of the time, and he knows to kind of save those infantrymen, play this, not, trebuchet, not as much points as infantrymen, and a lot easier to set up the infantrymen. You just thin them out of your deck. And he knows to save that for round 3. He's a card down, but he has a very good hand.
He does a very nice hand. Yeah, and it's going to be interesting to see if that Commander's Horn gets mulliganed or if it manages to find value. But there comes the Temerians straight back out thanks to the mulligan. And this is going to be a very tense. Kira Metz, though, that is a significant amount of points when you're looking at this few cards.
Yeah, we see a lot of gold. I mean, this is what this deck does. It plays with the bronzes at round 1, it thins a lot, and the bronzes are always high value, so they still get a lot of points. And you save your golds for round 3. Who has the better gold? I mean, Kolemoen being a card up is, it's the big thing, really.
Yeah, that's really, really interesting to see here. Oh, my apologies, by the way. These aren't actually the identical decks. Kolemoen runs Kira Metz, whereas Adzikov runs Philippa Eilhart instead. So you could see a Philippa here, but that would be pretty devastating. Actually.
There's a few differences, but in general, they're very similar core with the...
Numerically, they're actually tempo-wise fairly similar. It's just one's proactive and one's reactive.
Exactly. So I mean, both players have a different take on how this would pan out and what kind of deck they want to bring. But in general, very similar point value from this. It's a value for this deck. That's what it's called, basically.
Yeah. So here we go. We see Stennis coming down with the reinforced ballista. Sadly, that is only going to fire once, as Stennis recently lost his crewman license. But it's still points, right? It's still points on the board. But I can't shake the feeling that this extra card for Kolemoen could just be so vital.
Exactly, and that horn I think is going to get, pretty much it's going to get value no matter what. There's no real movement possibility from Adzikov to kind of disrupt that horn. And I think that, there's not really much you can do, really.
The big thing is, as well, because of that Stennis Resurrect, if a Philippa were to appear, the armor would soak up so much of that tempo.
My lads will make sure of that.
Exactly, and Philippa is not a card. We're going to see a Natalis with a reinforced siege tower, but like you said, Philippa is not a card you normally run, so I think Kolemoen doesn't even know he's playing around that, but even then, that could be, points that might decide this game as well.
Yeah, that's a really, really, really poor Dijkstra. A dead Natalis feels bad, man. But I just think, because that bad Natalis, I've got to look at Kolemoen's hand and say that he's got it here.
Yeah, just with the extra card, it's already maybe a 90-10% difference between both players going to round 3. But that Natalis kind of sealed the deal. I think it's going to be very, very hard for Kolemoen or for Adzikov to stay in this game. Just too many points from Kolemoen, and winning that flip at the beginning in the mirror is just vital. If Adzikov doesn't dry pass, he can, what happened? He can lose on even and then get dry pass round 2, and that's devastating.
Yeah, it's really, really significant as well, because Kolemoen's managed to win a game going first and second now, and he went second in this one, so Adzikov does get to go second.
I hope we can trust you.
Adzikov's going for the reverse sweep. And it's very easy to go, haha, yeah, reverse sweep, whatever. But we have seen this happen. We've seen teleport go to the final of a Gwent Open. We've seen this happen a lot, so don't count him out yet. Adzikov is going to be 2-0 down. This is going to be Kolemoen's game in a very, very well-played game. I love the buff disruption that happened early on in this game. I think it gave him. Because it came down to 8 points round 1.
Yeah, it was absolutely massive. And we see a deck that thinned perfectly to 0 with Horn still in hand. Didn't have to use it. 20 points that you don't even have to use and still you win the mirror. That means you played pretty well, I think, and you went to pass and went to push. And I think Kolemoen really showed that he does know how to do that really well. He has one deck left to play, just King Brand. He wins with just one more game, and he's in the semifinal. Adzikov, of course, going to try and disrupt that game plan from Kolemoen and push and just try and get back into this game as quick as possible.
Yeah, it's certainly going to be an interesting one. It's certainly going to be an interesting one for Kolemoen here. He does only have his brand left, which is going to be very, very interesting indeed. So what do you think of this remaining brand deck for Kolemoen? This is like a famously consistent deck, right?
It is. It kind of fell off, I think, in the last few patches. It's a bit linear for my taste. I think it doesn't have the explosive plays that other decks might bring, like Greedy Consume. If it works out well, you can end up with a ton of carryover and a ton of just very high value points by just plays by just eating the Neckers, for example. And like Value Full Test, it has those explosive plays like the Infantryman, like the Stennis, like the Horn, like John Natalis, that helps a lot in making sure you can close out games and really burst ahead of your opponent. Whereas King Bran, it has the consistency with King Brand because of the carryover and the Morkvark or the Olgierd, for example, with Ceres. It has, the Harpooners for long-term value, but other than that, plays are kind of very linear. They're not as explosive as other decks, I think.
Yeah, it's going to be very, very interesting to see indeed as we get ready for the next match. Of course, premium Vez cosplay right there. And we're getting ready to go into the second game. Just, you know, doing what we do, twiddling our knives, leaning on balconies. But I think that Adzikov has a mountain ahead of him. 3 games against a very famously consistent deck, piloted by a fantastic player. Adzikov's a great, great player, but do you think he's got it in him?
I mean, in a reverse sweep, you kind of need a deck that your opponent can, if you counter your opponent's deck very well, it's a lot more likely to reverse sweep there. Like, decks that have a very exact game plan, like maybe mill or consume, something you can shut down easily with all your decks, but like you said, Kingbrand is not a deck that you can really disrupt that easily. I mean, it's a deck that has a very linear game plan, but it executes it very well in every single game. So it comes down to maybe coin flip and just a little bit of luck for most matchups. But if you have 3 games to do it, I mean, just from a sheer odd perspective, you're definitely going to pull ahead at least 1 win.
Absolutely, and we're seeing the mulligans come in here. There's a muzzle in hand. Jiggle Wolf himself, the premium muzzle. This is going to be so tense. Focusing, sorry, just so into these mulligans right now. This is going to be such a tense game. Adzikov playing for survival. kolemoen playing for his spot in tomorrow's semi-finals, where the winner of this series will be playing Tailbot for a spot in the grand final. So everything to play for now for both players. Every game remaining of this series is sudden death.
And the most important thing here is the weather clears. We don't see Gremist in hand, but Gremist is in this deck for kolemoen, so he has that option later on to try and find that Gremist and be able to counter Frost in that way. Some of kolemoen decks don't really have weather clear. We saw Baya earlier, but Full Test, for example, has no weather clears. Luckily, he didn't play into a weather deck with that deck, and he was able to dodge that a bit, but this deck does have the answers there, so I think it's going to come down to that. If you find Gremist, and you might even maybe go for a discard here, but decides not to, and just go for the full value from Wolfsbane, from Ceres, for example.
Now, this was a card that really terrified people when the patch came out. It's kind of simmered off nowadays, so what do you think about this Wolfsbane inclusion by kolemoen?
I mean, if you have the flex gold slot, which I think kolemoen decided he does have, even though he has muzzle as well, it's essentially free points with Kingbrand. I mean, a lot of players are still kind of not too convinced by it, but I think it's fairly decent. I mean, you get the 3 points as long as you can stay into the first round, and maybe force your opponent to stay in the round as well, because the pass is pretty brutal if you can't catch up in the second round of the game. But it's just a free point, basically. I mean, it works out pretty well for most of the times with Kingbrand. It's
such an interesting matchup for it, too, because it's going up against something that loves long rounds. But this kind of deters Odin from a long round. So it's going to be interesting to see how this makes an impact on round 1 here.
It also makes the slow tempo start from Aridin even slower with that Wolfsbane, getting those points to kolemoen later on in this round as well. And like we saw with Consume as well, as long if you can out-tempo your opponent's Aridin deck very quickly, it can really disrupt your opponent's gameplay, because he has to maybe pass because he just thinks he can't catch up, and then you lose control of round 2, you lose control of round 3, and that can be devastating for a deck that loves long rounds so much like Aridin does.
Yeah, we're going to see a card definitely make an impact this game that Skellige love in this matchup, which is, of course, the Armorsmith bashing away on his anvil there. So that card, if you don't know what it does, it heals units completely and adds a little bit of armor to them too. So, of course, when things have been taking a lot of damage in the weather, that guy can be huge tempo swings.
Exactly. No Gremist, but at least you have your, your helpful Armorsmith in hand to help out with that. But also, I mean, we see 3 Freyas in hand for kolemoen. Not ideal in round 1. You normally want your reses for round 3 where you actually have targets in the graveyard. But I think in this case, it worked with Battle Maiden, for example, able to pull something out there with a Warmonger and just get that Raider tempo and the Ceres, synergy going really quickly.
Yeah, interesting Battle Maiden placement coming out here from kolemoen as well. What he's doing is actually RNGing his Morgvarg. He's saying, well, there's now a 50-50 chance as to whether the Battle Maiden or the Morgvarg dies. So he's trying to save the strength on that Morgvarg, as well as, maybe prevent a premature Ceres from coming out of his graveyard, because really he wants that to be proccing round 2.
Not only that, but also gives him an extra Freya target if he's forced to use the Freya if he goes into a long run and wants to stay in this round, for example. So it's a really good play from kolemoen. I think he really reads the game through all its different angles, not just linear play points, try and win the round, but also thinking about his reses, thinking about how to dodge if he's had that Morgvarg from dying. It's just a lot of the different subtle things that the kolemoen does that really cements him as a good player and really shows that he's here to win this game.
Yeah, I must say I'm very, very impressed with kolemoen's play so far. It's been an absolute pleasure watching him play, and this is going to be very, very interesting indeed. Lots of frost damage going. Wolfsbane just went off, of course, giving kolemoen the edge, but it isn't as scary of a gap as often that card can cause, because Adzikov is just churning the damage out here with this frost.
Yeah, I think kolemoen knows he's going to have to pass eventually in this round without the Grimace. It might, you know, once you see 2 Frost taking every single turn from the very start, it ends up adding up, and it just creates a very big point gap. But at least he has the Armor Smith to help out here. Might just decide to heal that more quick before it dies, and also the Warmonger at 4 points. It'll heal it up, and then maybe if RNG is on his side, it'll hit the armor in the next few turns as well.
Yeah, I really like the Armor Smith here, actually, for a few reasons. Of course, it is fantastic. That's a little bit of a point boost, protect that Morgvarg too. And then it actually puts it in your toolkit, right? It puts it in your little, you know, handy box of Priestess of Freya supplies for later rounds. So once that's down, that's there as a res, so you can play it again, which is probably going to be happening in this game because it's such a cool card in this matchup. And here we go, there's that Morgvarg getting some armor, and the Warmonger, and actually a pretty decent 18-point gap, potentially only with 2 points of frost damage coming, if of course, you know, luck is in kolemoen's favor.
And we see Adzikov eyeing that gap and saying, you know, I don't like this so much, maybe I'm going to play Iris now, and tell my opponent that he's in trouble, and I'm going to start racking up a lot of points very quickly, thanks to that, you know, Frost, Rider, Iris synergy.
But I mean, Iris as a catch-up mechanic can be very, very daunting to continue playing after.
I mean, as long as you're winning on even, for example, if you play that Iris and able to catch up and win this round on even with the Frost taking for you as well and staying in this round for, you know, just to try and win it on even, kolemoen has a carryover, and he has that way to play around the dry pass in round 2, but we also might see a spy from Adzikov that kolemoen can't answer back to, so, I mean, it's tough for kolemoen. He has to decide when to back out if he can, you know, if he can't catch up and get a good pass in round 1.
Yeah, it's going to be very interesting to see how this one winds out. There's a few interesting cards in Adzikov's hand. Gil's, of course, just such a fantastic efficiency engine. And Toad Prince as well. I still want to call that card Giant Toad. Toad Prince is lurking there. And he's only really got a Rider to eat right now.
I think the important thing is that kolemoen is not running Ulrich in this deck, which means that if Freiner is played by Adzikov in round 2, and he does win this round on even, he'll go a card up into round 3. So, I mean, there's a lot of really good things going on for Adzikov right now. If he has control of this round, it can really bleed out kolemoen. And I mean, we're going to see a fairly good Harpooner here if he decides for it, or just maybe carryover as well, or Drowner even with the Dorgray.
Yeah, I think we may end up just seeing carryover established here. But actually, it's going to be a Wyvern, killing that Rider, eliminating some of that damage, and denying the instant kill Iris. That is so important, because all of a sudden, that Iris does not immediately die. That means that kolemoen has a turn to react, instead of just being slammed in the face by a 25-point bomb.
But when a Rider dies, another one comes to take its place, and Blizzard does that job very well, adding a thinning mechanic and also 3 extra points. Adzikov making sure he does have that Rider in the graveyard, hasn't gone and ridden off somewhere else. It is there, he's going to consume it and thin one more out from his deck, which just makes his deck more consistent later on and be able to draw gold in the cards he really needs for round 3.
Yeah, absolutely. Adzikov's doing it right, getting Slizzard and correctly putting it in the range road to ensure that deals as much damage as possible, as otherwise, you know, there'd be a 1-strength Raider which would soak up a hit and not be very much used to anyone at all. But actually, the delay is still there because there are 2-strength units in both rows covered by Frost, meaning that Iris would not be hit by the Frost at all, actually, in its first turn. So, interesting that, despite the fact it was answered with another Rider due to the Slizzard, the delay was still in effect.
And the Harpooner now, great value there from the Harpooner, not just getting damage, which is fantastic, and it gets, you know, pretty good values in longer rounds, but also disrupting that Rider. Of course, Rider will do extra damage on rows that have Frost. The back row, it's not very frosty right now, which means that he plays around that Rider damage for just a little while longer.
Yeah, very, very, very smart move there. You know, Harpooner getting dropped for 11 points and the disruption of that Rider mechanic is just such a key play and really just highlights why that card is so omnipresent in Skellige these days. So I think that this is an interesting place for Adzikov in the match. He has to either really commit from here on out or get out of there.
I think if he does really commit, he has last say in round 3, and he's also going to have, you know, a chance to find the Frightener. I think that's the key of this match. If he finds a Frightener in round 2 and wins this round, I think he has a very high chance of winning the game, even though he has maybe not as great short round as kolemoen has with the carryover and Sarah's potentially coming out as well. But in this case, Adzikov really pushing this round and trying to win this round on even to maybe, you know, get some revenge on kolemoen for the last try pass in the last game that he was able to do in the full test mirror and get card advantage that way.
Yeah, do you think we see just another Harpooner come out here?
We might just, I mean, Harpooners, they work not just in damaging, and of course we see some pretty stacked rows right now, so it's pretty good damage for a bronze unit, but also in disrupting game plans so much, like the Drowners, like we spoke earlier. Rows matter a lot right now in Gwent, and disrupting game plans is also obviously essential just to try and maximize points.
Absolutely. I'm kind of wondering what will be the main
Modern
puzzle target
Freyr is
for kolemoen,
patient.
because There's
But
not
she brooks
anything
no
that
insult.
screams out to be muzzled, but of course, it can just be played as a 14 or 16
The
gold
time
card.
for
Even though it's not exactly dead, but we don't even see a Harpooner from hand. It is a Battle Maiden Harpooner for the extra tempo. That Harpooner dealing its damage, getting Ceres out. My goodness, that was quite a turn from kolemoen.
And now maybe kolemoen decides that if Adzikov cannot catch up in this round, there's a pretty big point gap here. He might try and go for a pass, which is maybe the only pass he's going to get in this round to get out while still forcing Adzikov to play 2 cards and not just 1. So he can't win on even. So kolemoen, big tempo play, obviously committing that Ceres that won't come out in round 2, not immediately at least. And that might just be the deciding factor in this game as well.
I know, I think kolemoen could even potentially just push to take this round. I mean, depends on what this girls pulls, you know, if we see significant tempo come out, then sure, kolemoen's not really going to see any reason to fight into that, but honestly, there's really great cards. I mean, just Harpooners alone right now are representing 13 points of value.
But the Frost taking every turn is just one more turn where you're just, giving your opponent's points basically.
Igni coming hit. It's only
in the back row, getting an 8-point Harpooner with the Frost ticking, but it's ticking on armor. This is why armor is so good, and it does no damage, and it gives kolemoen the chance to pass. He's 1 point up. He has a chance here to pass. I personally think he's definitely going to take it. It does give Aridin control of a longer round 3, but it's also maybe if you predict a Frightener from your opponent, maybe it's the time to get out of this round when you can and not get into a very messy situation with the dry pass in round 2.
kolemoen looks like he is debating your advice quite significantly there, and it'll be interesting to see if he takes it, because the temptation is there to push for this round, right? I mean, that Igni going on the back row only made his Harpooner better. He's then also got Muzzle. There's a 7 strength Drowner there. While it's not amazing, okay, it's still a 14-point card. There is real value in cards for kolemoen right now.
But the Frost will be ticking for only 2 points next turn, so it's still not as bad. You might just go 1 or 2 more cards into this. Freya and the Sigrifa normally plays you don't want to see in round 1. You might just save those for round 3. So again, the same point gap, 52 to 37. Nothing has changed. We're replaying the last 2 turns, and kolemoen decides to play in here and see if maybe Adzikov has dead cards. I mean, a Frost Hound, not great as a tempo play late into a round. The Monster's Nest, kind of the finisher for Adzikov as well. So, and Iris as well. I mean, a play that gives no tempo as long as he doesn't, Boomba in that first turn it's played. So, it's going to be tough here for Adzikov playing a very low tempo Wildland Hound.
We've always got to get it in once. It's interesting to see the Wildland Hound come out here. kolemoen will probably be very pleased with that, as it gives him another opportunity to pass 40 card advantage, therefore theoretically reversing the coin flip, which is very, very advantageous against an Aridin. But like you say, it would give Aridin the direction of the flow of the match, and that could result in a long round 3, which is definitely something that kolemoen doesn't particularly want against an Aridin.
Yeah, every extra card that is played in this round is 1 less card played in round 3, and that's huge for kolemoen. Of course, we see 2 strength units in the back row. The Rider Synergy is active once again, but Iris won't go off immediately because there are units blocking that, because it is a higher strength unit than the Dorgray and the Battle Maiden. So kolemoen, he was still safe, but he said, it's time to get out of here. I have 3 rows ticking with Frost. I'm taking, 6 damage every turn. I don't want to be in the Blizzard no longer. Let's go on to the next round and see what Adzikov has in store for me.
I mean, that Morgvarg has survived wonderfully, considering how early that Frost went on it. That Morgvarg has managed to stay at a reasonable strength. It won't get banished when it goes to the graveyard, which is very, very key when you're playing Ceres and you desperately want it to come out round 3.
And Adzikov with 3 cards that, I mean, what do? You can play the Giant Toad, but that might be a play you want to save for later on. Same with Monster's Nest and Iris. Obviously a card that you can't use this round because you don't win the round in 1 turn. So he decides to move the Morgvarg and get that damage tick. He counts the points very carefully because Morgvarg does come back, and he is still definitely ahead. He completely seals the deal on that Morgvarg, kills it 2 times, and weakens the Ceres game a lot. I love that play from Adzikov. Very, very smart. Able to deal one of the win conditions from kolemoen.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I feel I may have just double cursed that Morgvarg by saying he wasn't going to get banished by going to graveyard. He has now been banished by going to the graveyard. So yeah, very great play from Adzikov when he was faced with some not great options. He definitely made the best of a bad situation there. And he sees White Frost come out, which is another major source of attrition damage for him.
But in a shorter round, not as great. Iris mulligan there. It's an inner, and he's going for a short round play. And Iris, if you don't have the right setup, it doesn't get that many points. If you have Frost going and Riders, it's great in a long run because you can guarantee just 25-point silver drop, which is absolutely amazing. But if you don't have that guaranteed combo, it can be very tricky.
Yeah, great to see for him that Toad Prince coming out as well. Because sorry, not the Toad Prince, the Manticore for the Toad Prince coming out, because that is the ideal target. It makes it an 18-point Toad Prince draw, and then of course it powers the draw.
And Adzikov, because he killed that Morkvark and there is no carryover, no Ceres ticks going into that Ceres because Morkvark is dead, and no Olgierd in this deck that has a Wolfsbane as well, it allows him to dry pass. There is no carryover blocking that pass, and he can just go into, a round 3 that's not incredibly long, but it's still fairly long. And kolemoen, without carryover, without the Ceres coming out, at least not at the start of round 3, and with cards that he would have wished to see maybe earlier, like Gremist, for example.
Oh, the Gremist may be coming down now, but remember, it is always available to be resurrected by Sigdrifer, so it may still do significant clearance in round 3, as it is being played right now for the bear, eating Gremist. There we go. So kolemoen has very powerful resurrects. There is Restore for Gremist, there is Sigdrifer, there is Restore for Battle Maiden. He's got a lot of very powerful options right now, as well as Muzzle, just waiting to steal away a Wild Hunt Rider if it appears. But it looks like may struggle to find a Muzzle target here. I wonder if it gets dropped.
Muzzle is very tricky. It's a card that works against some decks because you're always going to find value with it. For example, against Nilfgaard with the Impair Enforcers, and against other decks like maybe Movement Scoia'tael that has, the cards like the Markman that are 7 strength that are perfect targets as well. But in this case, I mean, we see the Drowner, so the perfect target for Muzzle. We did just curse that really quickly. He does have that Drowner chance to steal it with Muzzle.
Yeah, absolutely. It's going to be a very, very interesting round indeed. What do you think of his decision to keep Muzzle here? Do you think it's right? Or, I mean, the Drowner's 14 points, right? But he didn't know that was coming out. It'd be risky. It's
risky, but I mean, mulliganing in gold always feels bad, man. So I think he decided to keep that in hand and make sure that he had the highest chance to win this game, considering he doesn't have last say, and he's going to be in a bit of trouble if Aridin has the right cards to be drawed.
Yeah, definitely. It's going to be a very interesting match. This Warmonger coming out, remember, this could be the final round of this series as Adzikov is fighting for his survival and kolemoen is fighting for his place in tomorrow's semi-finals. So incredibly important round of Gwent right now.
And we saw 2 Raiders in the graveyard there, which means that kolemoen has a total of 3 reses available, and that's just enough to get that Ceres out as well. So thankfully for him, he has the perfect amount of res ticks ready to go for that Ceres, and that extra 7 points might be game deciding. So I mean, it's really huge for him to have that perfect amount of points and 2 Raiders saved in his deck for this great combo.
Yeah, there's some seriously powerful, scary cards coming out right now. Just an 8-power Gremist alone is a pretty terrifying thing. Even if you just drop that for tempo, it's 19 points, which is really significant. So I like kolemoen's position right now.
Yeah, I mean, definitely. Adzikov, White Frost, 2 rows with Frost is great in a long round. In a short round, not so much. Especially when you're playing against a player that has that guaranteed Gremist and Armor strength. I mean, it's tricky for Adzikov. He's not going to get value from that Frost energy. And I think really kolemoen has just a much stronger hand.
Yeah, we're even going to see Ceres come out. Ceres is currently sitting on a 1-timer, meaning whatever Sigdrifer resurrects will bring the Queen out alongside it.
We might see a great Iris synergy here with the White Frost, with the Drowner potentially moving it as well. So maybe I spoke too soon. I mean, White Frost is, not great when it doesn't have the right synergies, but with the right synergies, with Iris on the board as well, it can potentially do a lot of damage.
Yeah, definitely. That Iris timing will be very important. But the problem is Adzikov is only going to have 3 units to receive its buff, so it's not going to be a max power Iris. It is going to be a low caliber 15-point Iris.
And Adzikov and kolemoen has the Grimace anyway, so I mean, once he sees the Frost go down, he knows Iris might be coming soon. I'm going to, and you said 3 units, not even 3 units, Muzzle. Coming in once again, the hottest card in the meta right now, I think. Everyone's playing it, everyone loves it and hates it at the same time, but it's a card we see in almost every single deck. It's just really good.
Yeah, maybe hot, but it sure ain't spicy, but it is very important to these decks, and like we see there, just denying Iris another buff target, and potentially starting to seal the deal for kolemoen right here.
If Iris doesn't go off, it's a no tempo play. It's really bad. So Adzikov, maybe not the card he wanted to draw this round. If like I said before, if you can get it off, it's free 25 points with the right synergies, with the Riders and the Frost. If you can't though, it's garbage.
Yeah, this is not looking good for Adzikov, and unfortunately there's just such powerful plays. It's not like he's going up against another couple of sort of meandering bronzes. He's going up against an 8-point Gremist and a Sigdrifer. This is just looking savage. Honestly, kolemoen could just eat the Iris right now and just make it 5 points.
He could do that as well. He could also just maybe decide to go for the bear here and not play the Weather Clear. And instead, yeah, like you said, he's going to eat it now.
The Iris, there we go. 5-point Iris. Oh my goodness, not the Boomba you want to see. That is a measly. Oh, there we go. Adzikov forfeiting. kolemoen taking the series. Oh, no, he decides. Oh, he thought about the forfeit. He debated us.
Play it out.
Going
to see what can happen here, but just doesn't have the points, even with the Drowner.
He's like, as I go out, I'm going to mess with the casters, and I'm going to protect
I do
them.
not quit.
But I mean, a sad story for Adzikov, getting 3-0 in the first round. I think kolemoen played really well. Adzikov maybe just a bit unlucky, or just not playing, as cleanly as his opponent. We see Stairs coming out as well. I mean, just a very, very clean play from kolemoen here, really showing his skill. I mean, he's a player we haven't seen in tournaments yet, but he's shown up, and he's shown up in quite a way.
Absolutely stunning performance by both players, but kolemoen especially demonstrating an incredible level of skill there. Honestly, for this guy's first live tournament match, incredibly impressed by this guy. So here we go, both players showing a good deal of sportsmanship. Great game of Gwent.